They didn't let him cry at the funeral. They didn't let his name be printed on the obituary. But when the nightmares came, it was his name the children whispered in the dark. Eliot Monroe stood at the edge of the cemetery, umbrella trembling in his hand. The rain matched the weight in his chest as Nathan Brooks, the man he'd built a quiet, steadfast life with, was lowered into the ground. Beside the casket, Eleanor Brooks stood rigid. Her pearls were too white, her silence too loud. She didn't acknowledge Eliot, not once. For years, Eliot had shared a home with Nathan and his twin daughters, Nellie and Marie. The girls were barely walking when he first held them. Their mother had passed shortly after birth, leaving Nathan to piece together a family from grief. Eliot never asked to replace her. He only offered warmth when they cried, packed lunch boxes with little notes, stitched buttons back onto tiny cardigans at midnight. He wasn't legally anything, just there, present, constant, and that was precisely the problem. Eleanor made her move the day after the burial. No warning, no discussion. "You don't belong in this house," she said sharply, her hands cold even when folded in fake prayer. "You're just a stranger, a degenerate who tricked my son into your perversion." Eliot didn't respond. He couldn't. His voice had gone missing somewhere between grief and disbelief. She took the children by the hand and walked them out the front door. Marie turned to look back. She didn't understand. Neither did he. There was no marriage certificate, no will, nothing but shared memories and a few framed photos now shoved into a cardboard box at Eliot's feet. He slept on a friend's couch for the next few days, numb. His days were a blur of bureaucratic phone calls and dead ends. He wasn't even allowed to know where the girls had been taken. The law, it seemed, had no room for the man who fed them, bathed them, carried them through fevers, and kissed them goodnight for nearly half a decade. 3 weeks passed, and then a text. Highway 27, right shoulder, 2 girls, soaked and crying. No name, no explanation, just those words. Eliot's hands shook as he read them, heart skipping between dread and disbelief. He ran to his car, not even sure if it was real. Rain was falling hard, again as if the sky remembered. And there they were. 2 small figures, drenched and trembling beneath a flickering roadside sign. Marie held a soaked stuffed bear. Nellie's shoes were gone. Their hair clung to their cheeks, their eyes swollen from crying. Eliot didn't speak. He didn't need to. He scooped them into the car, turned the heat up, wrapped them in a blanket from the trunk. Their bodies pressed against him, instinctively, as if their hearts had refused to forget what their blood had. At the hospital, the nurse asked his relation. I'm no one," he said quietly. They were mildly hypothermic. Nothing life-threatening, thank God. But when the doctor contacted the authorities, Eliot found himself surrounded by suspicion. "You have no legal custody of these children," the officer said. The handcuffs weren't far. And then, Marie whispered from her hospital bed, "Daddy, Sky, don't leave us, like Grandma did." Silence fell. Heavy, unyielding. It was the first time anyone in that room realized this wasn't just about biology. It was about who stayed, who showed up, every single day, even when the world told them they didn't belong. And sometimes family is not who shares your name, but who shows up in the rain and never lets go. If this story moved you, follow Heart Story for more true-to-heart storytelling. The world may not always protect those who love differently, but real love never leaves its children behind. Eliot never remembered how he got back behind the wheel that night. His hands were shaking too much to hold the steering wheel steady, yet he drove with the focus of someone whose heart had just been broken open again. The hospital let him stay long enough to make sure the girls were stable. Nellie clung to his shirt like it was the only dry thing left in the world. Marie drifted in and out of sleep, still holding the soggy stuffed bear Eliot had given her on her second Christmas, the one with the little red scarf and the name Benny stitched on its paw. He had sewn it himself. The nurse finally told him gently that Child Protective Services would take over in the morning. No matter how strong the girl's attachment, the rules were clear. Eliot wasn't family. He wasn't a guardian. In the eyes of the system, he was no one. By morning, a social worker arrived. Her badge read, Carmen Lewis. She was calm, professional, and watchful. Her gaze lingered not only on the paperwork, but on the way Marie curled toward Eliot's chest even as the IV beeped nearby. He stepped back, letting them take over. He didn't resist. There was no courtroom to plead in, no papers to hold up, just his empty hands. Later that day, Carmen called him in for questioning standard protocol. But Eliot noticed something in her tone. She wasn't just checking boxes, she was listening. She asked about the past 5 years' birthdays, school pickups, doctor visits. Eliot answered with the kind of detail only someone who lived in the small, invisible moments would know. He told her about the twin freckles behind Nellie's left ear, how Marie used to rock herself to sleep humming Twinkle Twinkle, how they both hated cucumbers but loved green jelly beans. Carmen didn't type much during that part. She just looked at him like someone seeing past what the law said and into what the truth really looked like. Later, she began reviewing medical forms, insurance records, even daycare emergency contacts. And there it was, Eliot's name, over and over, the emergency guardian, the health insurance proxy, the parent's signature for every field trip since preschool. But when Carmen contacted Eleanor Brooks for follow-up, the woman denied everything. "I don't know who would leave them there," she said curtly. "But I can assure you, it wasn't me. They must have run off." You know how children are. That same day, Eliot sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by quiet. The framed photo of Nathan on the shelf above the couch stared back at him. He had memorized every wrinkle around that smile. It felt distant now, like a ghost in a house no longer his. Then Carmen called again. "We got footage," she said. "A gas station camera near Highway 27. It shows a vehicle matching Eleanor Brooks' car. Pulled onto the shoulder, trunk open, then closed, and she drove away alone." Eliot didn't say anything. He simply exhaled, slow and full. He wasn't angry, not yet. Grief, after a while, runs out of room for rage. A week later, Eliot was granted limited visitation, 1 hour a week in a supervised playroom at the temporary care center. The walls were painted with dolphins and sunflowers, but it still smelled faintly like sanitizer and sadness. The girls didn't run toward him. They walked slowly, like they were afraid it wasn't real, like they were used to being disappointed. Nellie climbed into his lap. Her voice was small. "People keep saying they're figuring out where we should live. But why don't they just ask us?" Eliot didn't answer. He didn't know how. Marie sat beside them, resting her head on his arm. "I told the lady," she said, eyes half closed, "that Daddy Sky doesn't have a magic last name like us. But he's still our always daddy." Carmen stood in the doorway, watching. She didn't interrupt, she just watched. Later that day, she added a note to her report. "Subject is not biological nor legal parent, but fulfills role of de facto guardian based on long-term caregiving, routine, and emotional attachment, recommending full assessment under extraordinary circumstances." In some stories, love is a declaration, but in this one, it was a lunch packed each morning, a fever soothed at midnight, a bear sewn by hand, a man who showed up even after being erased. Sometimes the measure of a parent isn't found in court documents, but in the children who still whisper their name when the rain begins to fall. Every Tuesday at 10, Eliot sat in the worn-out green chair beneath the painted sunflower wall, waiting. The playroom always smelled like Play-Doh and powdered soap. The space was meant to feel safe, but it never did. Not when the clock on the wall marked only 60 minutes. And the children knew it. When Nellie and Marie walked in each week, they always moved slowly, like their feet didn't trust the floor. But the moment their eyes met Eliot's, something changed. Their shoulders relaxed. Their faces softened, as if they'd been holding their breath since the last visit. They never asked why he couldn't take them home. Not anymore. Children notice things, even when they're not explained. They could feel the thin glass of the rules between them, rules that said Eliot wasn't a parent, only a visitor. But on the 5th visit, something different happened. Nellie brought a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. She had drawn a picture with thick markers, a house with a garden, 2 girls on a swing set, and a tall man beside them holding a watering can. "This is our home," she said. "The real one." Carmen Lewis, who now supervised the sessions directly, watched silently from the corner of the room. She had spent weeks combing through documents, transcripts, and archived photos. But what moved her more than anything was the way Marie rested her cheek on Eliot's shoulder every time she began to nod off, like a ritual only time could carve. That week, Carmen submitted a formal recommendation. It wasn't a guarantee, not even close, but she was willing to push Eliot's case forward under extraordinary emotional bond and continuous caregiving role. She also began compiling testimonies old teachers who had seen Eliot attend every parent conference, pediatricians who remembered his signature on forms, and neighbors who recalled seeing him walking the girls home from the bus stop, rain or shine. But Eleanor Brooks was not sitting quietly. When word reached her that Eliot might be considered for legal review, she contacted a local conservative news station. On live television, she accused him of manipulating her son into homosexuality, brainwashing her granddaughters, and violating God's order of family. The interview quickly went viral. The internet split into outrage and support. Some defended Eleanor as a grieving grandmother. Others saw a woman clinging to hatred in the name of tradition. Eliot didn't respond. Not to the cameras parked near his apartment, not to the messages flooding his inbox. He hadn't spoken publicly since the funeral. But then something unexpected surfaced. A parenting blog Nathan had contributed to 2 years before was unearthed. In it, he'd written, "I never thought I'd fall in love again after losing my wife. But Eliot didn't just rebuild my heart. He became the man our daughters chose before I even knew what that meant. I am their father, but he is their home." The word spread across social media. People began asking different questions, not about paperwork or politics, but about presence, about what makes someone a parent when biology and law fall short. Still, Eliot remained silent. He posted only one message. No photo, no comment thread. "I don't need to win. I only want to be there when they wake up crying in the dark and need a hug. That's all I've ever needed." Meanwhile, Nellie had started asking bigger questions during visits. "Why do people keep fighting about where we should live?" she asked Carmen softly one day. Before Carmen could reply, Nellie added, "Grown-ups keep saying they know what's best for us, but I already know. It's Daddy's sky. He's where the safe is." That evening, Carmen sat alone at her desk, rereading the state's definition of de facto parent. It included one line that stood out: an individual who, for a significant period, has assumed the role and responsibilities of a parent with the consent or acquiescence of the legal guardian. She highlighted it and whispered to herself, "They chose him," long before anyone asked. Sometimes the law hesitates where a child's heart does not. And perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't being denied by a system, but by those who should have known the difference between claiming love and living it. It was late evening when Carmen Lewis received an email with no subject line, sent from an address she didn't recognize. The message was brief. "I believe you're looking for this. Ruth." Attached was a single photo of a small wooden box, time-worn and latched shut with a tarnished brass hinge. Carmen called the number listed. The voice on the other end was thin, but clear. Ruth was Eleanor Brooks's younger sister, a woman long estranged from the family for reasons she didn't explain. She had come across the box while clearing out Nathan's old belongings from the attic of his childhood home. It had been tucked behind a stack of records, almost as if someone meant for it never to be found. 2 days later, the box arrived by courier, wrapped in a faded blue cloth. Carmen opened it carefully. Inside were only a few items, but each one pulsed with quiet weight. The first was a handwritten letter, ink faded, corners curled. It was addressed to Mom. Nathan's handwriting was unmistakable. "I know you'll never understand why I love Eliot. Maybe you'll never forgive me for choosing him. But I'm asking you, not for my sake, but for theirs if anything ever happens to me. Please let Eliot raise Nellie and Marie. He's not a replacement. He's a father in ways I'm still trying to be." Carmen paused. The words carried the softness of someone who had hoped to bridge two worlds but couldn't. Next, she found a small USB drive, unmarked. She plugged it into her laptop. A grainy video loaded. Nathan sat on the floor of his home office, back against the bookshelf, a gentle lamplight casting shadows across his face. He looked healthy, calm. His voice was steady. "This probably won't hold up in court if I don't get it notarized, but I wanted to record it anyway. Eliot deserves to hear it. If I'm ever gone, I want it known. I want my girls to stay with him. Not because he's perfect, but because he's there. Always has been." He smiled at something off camera. Then he added, Marie still hums when she falls asleep. Nellie gets scared during thunderstorms, and I freeze sometimes, not knowing how to soothe them. But Eliot, he never hesitates. He just knows. The last item in the box was a printed draft of a will, unsigned and undated. But the sentence that mattered was bold, underlined. Should anything happen to me, Eliot Monroe shall have full guardianship of Nellie and Marie Brooks. Carmen brought the materials before the family court under the clause of intent and extraordinary circumstance. It wouldn't be easy. Eleanor Brooks still held legal footing, however shaky. But evidence like this couldn't be ignored. When confronted, Eleanor didn't deny the items. She called them irrelevant, staged, possibly fabricated. This handwriting could be anyone's, she snapped at the hearing. You people will believe anything if it fits your agenda. Then Carmen played the video. The courtroom went silent. In it, Nathan described not only the girls' routines, but specific memories, the time Eliot stayed up all night before Marie's surgery, the way he built a reading nook in the attic for Nellie during her dinosaur phase, the names of the bedtime songs, the code words they used when scared. They were things no stranger could possibly know. But it was what Eleanor said next that held the room in a grip of breathless disbelief. When asked directly why she left the children on the side of the road, she folded her arms tightly as if bracing for impact. Her voice didn't waver. I just wanted them to learn, to know early. The world doesn't have room for people like him. The words fell like stone. For the first time, no one came to her defense. The same silence she once demanded now closed in around her. The judge didn't comment, but Carmen could see it in the shift of posture, in the way the staff scribbled more urgently. The story was no longer just about legal guardianship. It was about willful abandonment. It was about dignity withheld from a man who had carried fatherhood without ever being handed the title. After the hearing, Carmen sat in her car for a long time before turning the key. Her hands trembled. She kept thinking about that box. It wasn't just filled with evidence. It held something deeper, a final, desperate plea from a man who knew his love would be questioned and tried to speak beyond the grave to protect the family he'd built. And she thought of the children, who had already chosen, who didn't need paperwork to recognize safety, who had whispered, "Daddy Sky," when all else failed. Sometimes, what a person leaves behind isn't wealth or land or legacy. It's their voice trusting that someone someday will listen. Someday. And the most powerful act of parenting might simply be preparing the world to be kind to the ones you love after you're gone. 6 months later, Eliot Monroe stood in front of a one-story building with wide windows and faded green shutters. Above the door hung a wooden sign hand-painted in soft blue letters, "Sky and Storybooks and Play." Inside, the air smelled of paper and childhood. A small reading nook sat near the back, lined with beanbags shaped like animals. A shelf near the door displayed books that Nellie had chosen herself. "Anything with dragons," she said, "but only if they're the good kind." He'd bought the place with the small inheritance Nathan left behind, money no one expected, tucked away in a forgotten savings account Eliot had only discovered through Carmen's persistent efforts. The guardianship certificate had arrived on a rainy morning, the kind where memory clings to everything. The paper was thin, but the moment was heavy. He wasn't listed as stepfather, not partner, not emergency contact, just legal guardian Eliot Monroe. It felt like the first time someone else had finally said out loud what the girls had known all along. Carmen visited on a quiet Tuesday. She brought her niece, a shy little girl who clung to her coat. Marie was the first to run up, offering her a stuffed lion. Nellie followed, dragging a plastic bin full of crayons and glitter. Eliot came out from behind the register, sleeves rolled up, apron slightly dusty with flour and marker ink. He didn't say anything, just smiled as the girls shouted, "Daddy Sky," and ran to wrap their arms around him. Carmen watched from the doorway as Marie pulled out a new drawing this time. A house with 3 people and a dog, all holding hands. Underneath, in clumsy block letters, was the caption, "Home is where no one leaves you behind." Eliot leaned down to pin it to the community wall. His eyes didn't water, but his fingers lingered just a little longer than usual. That weekend, he packed snacks and crayons into a canvas tote. They were going to visit someone. The drive to the care facility was silent at first. The girls knew where they were going. Eliot had told them gently. There were no secrets now, only spaces filled with time and choice. The woman in the chair by the window barely looked up at first. Her hair was thinner now. The bitterness in her voice had dulled, replaced by something heavier emptiness. Eliot guided the girls into the room. Nellie walked up and placed something in her grandmother's hand, a small photograph of the three of them at the bookstore. Everyone was laughing. Even the dog. Mid-leap. "I don't know if you ever loved us," she said, her voice small but steady. "But Daddy Sky says forgiveness is for your own heart, not theirs." Eleanor Brooks didn't speak, but her hands trembled. Marie reached out, touched her arm once, then stepped back. No one forced connection. No one demanded apology. What they brought was something harder, something Eleanor had spent a lifetime withholding gentleness. They left quietly. Eliot held each girl's hand as they walked back to the car. No one looked back. That night, Eliot stood in the doorway of their shared bedroom. Nellie was already asleep, her sketchbook open beside her. Marie stirred and reached out. "You're not leaving." "Right," she mumbled. "Never," he whispered. "Not ever. Some people believe family is made by blood, others believe it's made by law. But sometimes family is simply the one who stays, even when the world says you don't belong. And when a child chooses love over fear, and love chooses to stay, that's the only legacy that matters." Now it's your turn. Do you think someone without biological ties can be a real parent, maybe even more than the ones who gave birth? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to follow Heart Story, where real love, real pain, and real people make the stories worth remembering.